Hey, welcome back to Black Magic TV. And here we are again with new updates. Thanks to Luke and Tiff for my new sign. Um, and today with me, I have a good friend, the Rumble Drags El Presidente, I guess you would call him. I don't know what you'd call him. The man behind the Rumble Drags, Todd Thompson. Todd, thanks for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
Todd's a really good bud. We've got to know each other quite well over the last few years. He's a hot rodder, a keen businessman, a roadie for his wife and her band. He's a sound engineer.
Yeah, I wear a lot of hats.
Untrained sound engineer.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Now, Todd, you're originally from Texas, right? Are you originally from here?
No, actually, I'm from Easton, Missouri.
Okay.
163 people when I was growing up. So, east of St. Joe.
All right. So you're from like the middle of nowhere, basically.
Middle of nowhere. Yeah.
But I know you're like you were a Texas. You lived in Texas.
I lived in Texas for 3 years.
I know you love Texas.
I love parts of Texas. I like some other parts, and there's parts that I don't like as much.
Yeah.
But,
I like Texas a lot. I think it's a great.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those places. It's like Wyoming. Like Wyoming is a great place to go and visit. I don't know if it's the place for me to go and live, though. You know what I mean? Like same thing about Colorado. It's a great place to go and visit. Austin is awesome.
Yeah.
Until you start figuring out the schematics of can I move here? Because I've had several friends over the years that are like, move down here. Yeah. But it's like, man, I don't. There's like one shop I could work at, and then it's like if you can't work there, then you got to go back to Collision, and then it's just like. But also now, like, there's so many people there.
Yeah, I think it was 2011. I moved from here to Lubbock, West Texas. Which, if people think Texas is Texas, I thought, well, I'm now in Lubbock. I'll be able to hit the roundup in Austin quite a few times, and I'll be able to see Dallas and some car stuff over around there I was interested in. And what people don't realize is like Lubbock, still 9 or 8.5 hours away from Austin.
Right.
But my wife Penny and I, we still managed to make it down there about every quarter. I got to do the roundup. I got to actually. We were married in 14, I believe, or no, 13, 11. We got married in 11 when I moved over there. And her honeymoon with me was in Austin at the Day of the Drags.
Oh, nice.
At Temple, Texas is where we were at the next morning. So she wasn't much into hot rods. She is into the music scene pretty well, and Austin fit her real well for that.
Right. Todd's wife is an excellent musician. She's a singer.
Yeah,
she's got a good band. They play around town all the time. They play out of town all the time.
Yeah.
I only know because Todd tells me the adventures of the road when he's caravanning around with Penny Lawrence and the. Yeah. But I like to call. I wish they would change their name to the Fixed Income Boys. I think that would be like the best shtick ever.
Yeah, I don't know if they'd appreciate that as well as we would. But
I don't know. They should. They're rock and rollers.
Yeah,
they get a good shtick. They're great. All their band is full. All the people in her band are awesome musicians.
Yeah, they are. And she had a band over in West Texas and played with them a lot. So she's been involved in music all of her life since a little girl. So that was kind of her thing when we got together. Is that she had her music, she had her hobby, so to speak. Although a lot more serious in West Texas, she got quite a bit of radio play. She plays around here. She can still play over there as much as she wanted to. But going down to Austin was an experience for her and I between the music, the live music that was everywhere, and the hot rods and the car culture. And got to hang out down at Murpho's. Got to hang out at the speed shop. Got to know Jesse James a little bit. Got to know. The Day of the Drags was, I think, kind of a predecessor to what is now the Southeast Gassers. Quayne Scott and those guys all had something to do with that. But that was an event that I went to that threw me for a loop because they had classes of drag cars, period correct, and it was 6 cylinder class, Y block class. It was things that you normally don't see go just get the crap kicked out of them for 2 days at a drag strip.
Right.
It was neat. It was really cool, and it just opened my eyes up that the things that I'd known about at the Ham that I'd always went to here locally or Joplin, that there's a bigger culture of that in other places. And the Day of the Drags at that time was the place to be for that. The Roundup was a cool show to go to. They had some very specific rules. So we got our eyes opened up again, just like you. We looked at moving in that direction. Um, Business and family matters brought us back to Missouri in 14, just in time. It was the right timing to be back here. My
Yeah.
mom passed away like a year later, so
Oh man.
it was a big move for Penny and her family, or her and her daughter, because they had been down there for over 13 or 14 years at that time, and I brought them back to Missouri. So here we
Yeah.
are.
Mine was 8.5 years ago, almost 9 years ago. Well, it had been like 9 years ago. I was down there, and the drummer for my band, Chris Ward, he had moved to Texas, and Chris had been for like a year. I was doing my deal, you know what I mean, like doing the thing, and we were going down there. Me, Dan from Lucky Boys, a bunch of our friends, Woody, a bunch of people you've met. We'd all go. A friend of ours, her dad owned. He was like vice president of Black Cat America or something, and he owned fireworks stands, and he had one in Houston. So we'd go to the Fifth Ward of Houston and sell fireworks for New Year's and Fourth of July.
Mm.
And we were there on the 4th of July. I was working for this guy up north painting. I was bouncing. I was doing other things on the side of both those jobs. And that's when I found this 75 Chevy van in Austin for like 1,800 bucks, ran and drove. So I took a mega bus from Houston to Austin, sight unseen, got all the rent out of this building I had from all the people living in it, got everybody's rent early, and I drove there, bought this fucking van. That guy gave me a bunch of drugs for free, like mushrooms and Adderall, and like, and then, and then I went to hang out with Chris, and Chris is like, got me like a little lit up. So at like dusk, I take out of Austin as it's getting dark, and take off just high on speed and mushrooms, driving down the interstate in this van I bought with no license plate on it. And then somehow I made it back to town. I don't know how, but then after that I was like, oh, I'm gonna move to Austin. But then,
Yeah.
not long after that I went to prison. So
Yeah. Well,
and then since then, right? Yeah,
lots changed.
Lots changed. But then since then, so many people live there now. I would never even think about moving
Yeah,
there.
yeah. We even went on the excursion with realtors and everything to look at property down there before we decided to move back up here. And it was affordable. It fit right in the category, but I thank God that we did come back to Missouri. That was,
Yeah,
like I said, it's the right timing.
I think with the roots that both of us have here, right, and like the support system we have, we're able to do, like, I can do this. You know what I mean? I got my kids. I know the schools. We know the area. We know people. But also, like, doing the drag races, doing the car show. Like, we have people that are willing, and not more than willing, like, love being able to help and be a part of all those things.
Absolutely. And the Rumble and the things that have come about in the last few years with that doesn't go without, other people's input. I mean, I had been going to the Ham for years. I had a bad weekend at the Ham, kind of like I did a couple weeks ago, or was it last weekend? I broke the car.
Right.
I'd broken at the Ham, and was talking to some buddies, like, somebody needs to do another Midwest event, and for nostalgia drags or something of that lane. And he suggested I walk over and talk to another guy that happened to be at the same car show that owned Bethany,
Right.
the drag strip. So Doug Dale now owns that drag strip, and we approached him there with Adam Burrows from the Bethany Speed Shop. Told them what we were thinking. They liked the idea, so get a hold of us, and they did. And I guess that somebody was me. That's who needed to put the drag race on.
Right.
So
Yeah. And that's, I mean, same thing, right? Like somebody approached me about, hey, would you want to help us put a thing on? And then me realizing there was a lack in the car culture for a thing that included everyone.
mm-hmm.
And so now I've got that going on, the Sunday of Labor Day. It's, not even to make money. That's the other thing people don't get. Like, none of us are doing this to make a buck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're spending money to create a space for the people of our scene, of our culture, to be able to, like, go do what we do. Because otherwise we wouldn't have anything.
Right. And whether that's a club putting on a show, whether that's, Yahoos and Ryan used to do ham drags and
Right.
together, or if it's, Continentals down in Austin doing the roundup.
Right.
There's exposure. There's a lot of exposure for the guy putting the event on or the group putting
Right.
the event on. There's just, not good exposure. You're exposed to all the bad. Yeah, there's some
Right.
good that comes with it.
Right, but it's always the negative that.
But myself, I really never. I don't care about getting credit for doing the event. My goal when we done it was for me to have a place to run and for other people like me to have a place to go race, run, and be around like-minded people. And
Right.
that the reason for that is just to continue to pass on.
You can manhandle that thing. Don't worry about it.
A culture that kept me out of trouble when I was younger because the cars and the mechanicking and whether that was working on a car or a lawnmower or trying to figure out how to advance the keyway on a small gas engine and get a few more horsepower out of it or whatever it was that I was doing growing up kept me out of worse trouble than I was able to get into, which I still managed to get into a little bit of it growing up.
Of course, my kid waits till 2 minutes after we start this. Can my friend come over? Yeah, I don't care.
It's the right. It's the exact right time to ask.
Yeah, that's a great time to ask. The text says, "I know you're doing your interview and all, and Todd's here, but can I have my friend come over?" Let's dive into that real quick. Did you grow up? Was your dad a hot rodder? Was your grandpa? Was somebody into cars, or was it just a thing that you found?
No. I had a dad that could do anything. I was lucky. And when I say that, most people would be like, you wish you had a dad like this. He knew electrical, he knew mechanics, he knew hydraulics, we knew diesel. And if he didn't, here's what I learned later in life. He figured if a man could do it, so could he. So we did whatever. And I grew up kind of on a farm, small hobby, what would be considered very much a hobby farm now. So I grew up in that environment where you learned how to weld when you were old enough to put the hood on. You learned how to do, maybe not great, but you knew how enough to be able to survive and do things. So the whole car thing, Dad had the bug as bad as I did. The thing was, Mom did a real good job of tamping that back and suppressing it. That and economics in the household probably played a big part in that. So in early 70s, probably 71 or 2, I was real little, probably still in diapers. I still remember driving home in a Roadrunner that he bought. And that stoked me because it was, I was a little boy, little kid, and I still remember the chalk written on the windshield, what he paid for it was $3,800 and some dollars. I don't remember how much exactly, but it was a Plymouth Roadrunner. And to me, that was a hot rod at that time. Right. So I remember riding home in it. It's kind of rainy out. I remember everything about it, but I was probably about 3, maybe 2.5, 3 years old. And he had a 58 Chevy that had I believe a 409 in it. It may have been 348. There was a lot of talk about stuff like that. He bought a new 71 Chevy pickup in 71. Then in 73 or 4, when Funny Car Summer, well, he'd taken me to the drag races a few times over in Troy, Kansas. And I remember him holding me while we were watching the drag races. And I remember watching, he called them English Fords. They were gassers is what they were. And I remember watching those live when that track was open in Troy, which I've kind of done a little research. That track wasn't open but just a few years before it shut down. But that embedded in my brain. Then he took me to the drive-in, or the, not drive-in, but the indoor theater, Hillcrest 4 in St. Joe to see Funny Car Summer. And I looked that up a while ago. That would have came out in 74, so I was about 7. My life's not been the same since that night.
It's been all drag racing.
It's where my interest was. There's better people. There's people that know a lot more about this stuff than I do, but that was whenever he infected my brain.
Yeah.
And I think he knew it that night. I remember riding home and talking about the movie on the way back home. They had a lot of night racing in it. It was a lot of nitro. It was a lot of flash and flare and noise. And live, I'd never seen anything like that until I was 19 years old.
Right.
Because where I lived at, there were drag races. They were kind of outlaw drag races over in the little town that I was from that would go on after 10 o'clock at night. And with the windows open at our farm, you could hear them over there.
Right.
And of course, my uncles. I've got one uncle that's always been very involved in it. So I'd go down to his shop and kick around and see what he was working on, whether it was his car or a customer's car. I had an uncle from California that was very much into it. And when my dad would retard the timing on my car when I got old enough, I'd take it over to my uncle and we'd make some adjustments on it and find a few more horsepower in it so I could go race before school. It was just stuff like that. It was really redneck stuff, but
yeah, how you learn.
Yeah.
And then since then, you I mean, I know you're a Ford guy. Was that always the thing, or
No.
was it that's just like?
No, it was a switch that, let's see, when I got to be 18, I became a dad. So that kind of readjusted the direction of where my life was going to go. So I got married and had my daughter. Not a bad decision. It was just a big change because I was barely out of high school.
18, yeah.
But I had a good job.
Right.
I had a great job and things could have been a whole lot tougher. But when it came to cars, I always had my priorities. I think I had my priorities straight. I got a back and forth to work vehicle, which was a 70 Chevy pickup. It started out as a 6-cylinder 4-speed truck. It was an old farm truck. I bought it off of a dealer that lived over near us. And I don't think that thing had ever been off the farm. It had no rust on it anywhere. It was dented up a few places. And to me, it was a 6-cylinder 4-speed. Wife had her good car that she drove every day. My truck went through several iterations. I think I had 13 different motors in it over the course of the time I had it. Went from a 6-cylinder to a solid cam small block that was built for a sprint car, which was way too much for it because then did the whole Vega converter to a turbo 350 thing, and I drove that truck back and forth 13 miles to work every day on basically avgas. I mean, it was not practical,
right?
But I was still doing what it took to be in touch with that stuff and learn. And then junkyard motor after we needed to sell the hot rod motor out of it to be able to get by, so stuck a junk 350 in it and drove it for a while, and then bought a big block and stuffed it in there and would run back and forth to the drag strip and even swap rear ends at the track so I could make passes and then drive the truck home on the other rear end that I drove out there on. I mean, I did some goofy stuff. So we kind of went through that phase on the truck. Then got a 69 Firebird that was a pretty nice car that a guy had built the motor in and somehow stabbed the distributor 180 out. And I figured out what was causing all of his problems before I bought it.
Yeah.
I bought it. We popped the distributor, stuck it back in, and it drove home just fine. That was a good little car. Fixed it all up.
I had a
So-
similar thing. Once I bought an '82 Jimmy for like $1,000, and me and my buddy Jake, that has that salty dog, he's been on the show before,
Yeah.
Jinsky. Me and Jake go look at it. There's a Juggalo sticker in the back window. It's a two-door, is a two-wheel drive Jimmy.
Yeah.
Slammed to the ground. Had a brand new crate motor, had a brand new transmission. It wouldn't shift out of first gear. And we're going like, what? We're like, well, it's got exhaust leak. It had one little patch of rust like that big in the bottom, like quarter size. And me and Jake are like, what the hell is the deal with this? And we look down and we noticed that the vacuum line on the distributor off the advance for the transmission was unhooked. So we were just like, yeah. I was like, yeah, I'll give you the $1,000 for it, bud. And I gave him the 1,000. We drove around the corner, hooked the vacuum line back up, and I drove 80 miles an hour all the way back to Bonner.
Yeah.
And then I sold the truck to his dad for like $4,000. Yeah, there's a Gina's friend must be over. But Tim still has the Jimmy. He still has it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they still have the thing. It's got like a heartbeat line painted down it now. He did like a total 90s change out to it. But continue, we were at the...
No, you were just talking about, the whole Chevy thing. At that time, I was parting out. You couldn't buy parts for 68 through 72 pickups.
Right.
Everything you could get from GM was a rocker panel for the driver's side. There weren't any LMC truck.
It was
wasn't any of
before
that stuff.
aftermarket stuff.
So I started buying these trucks and parting them out, and I found out I could sell tinted windows. I could sell, AC glass out of those trucks. I could sell the chrome trim. I could sell power steering boxes. So I'd buy trucks for $300. They'd make me $1,500. It was extra money at the time. Now I've got 2 little kids and a wife that doesn't work.
And in the late 70s, early 80s, $1,500 was nothing to golf at.
Yeah, that'd be late 80s.
Yeah,
That was
still.
still good money.
Man, don't you miss the $300 trucks? I remember
Yeah.
it. They were still around. I bought one. I bought a '67 for my dad's buddy. It had a 355 in it, and it was a short bed. I bought a short bed that I daily drove
Yeah.
for $1,500, and it wasn't all rusted out.
See, Tyler, at that time you could buy. I loved the ones that you would answer the ad. It would say Knox. It'd be like a '70 Chevy, and it was knocking. And you go over and you'd have like half a needle of oil pressure, and it's knocking like hell. It's a flex plate.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'll buy it. And you'd drive it home with a cracked flex plate.
yeah.
That truck was a good truck. There was a lot of that back then.
Mine had always had a crack. There must have been something with them flex plates on those.
I think so.
Because I couldn't keep one on that 355 back then.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's like fucking newspapers. Like kids today, like even like I forget sometimes, but like after Craigslist came around and then Marketplace. But dude, like in high school, we used to stop and we'd go to this grocery store every week on Thursday. This little gas station grocer, We'd get an order of biscuits and gravy, and you'd spend that $1 to take that Auto Trader, and then you'd sit in class just looking at shit
yeah.
you couldn't afford, like seeing what was available, and it was all like, it wasn't even just nationwide. It was like specifically, there was a magazine made specifically for this area, and it's like, dude, like people will never get it. In the newspaper, having to buy the Kansas City Star. I never bought a newspaper. I've never, to this day, I think maybe I've picked a newspaper up a couple dozen times sitting somewhere and looked through it, but I never bought the paper to read it. The only reason I bought that paper was like, okay, throw all this array. Where's the want ads at?
Yeah. I did the same. All of us did the same thing. It's a different time. I mean, still, if you looked at your browser history at how many things you looked up that were car related in the last 24 hours, it would probably blow most people away. You have access to it instantly now. But then it was Auto Trader or the Thrifty Nickel even, or I'd find stuff in there. It was like, 69 Chevy big block, 1,500, and go look at it, and it's a 69 Caprice with a big block in it.
Yeah.
I mean, like, wow.
Cool.
I did
I'll
walk
take
up
that.
on one of those. So as far as being a Ford guy goes, now there was the trucks, the Firebird, the 69, and I did all Pontiac stuff with it. There was some international sprinkled in there. I loved playing with the odd stuff. I had several of those old mid-60s four-wheel drives.
We had a guy bring us one to the shop and wanted it restored, and somebody had tried to hot rod it, so it was like the fenders had been welded up it's probably like an early 50s truck. and all the fender gap, like the lines, the seams had been welded, and then the hood was cut, the top was chopped, the body was channeled, and he's like, just take it back to original. And me and Rick were looking at everybody like, I literally opened up my phone and went to Marketplace and like expanded my search area and went like to a dry climate. I was like, for $10,000, you can just buy one of these that's restored.
Yeah.
Like, and then they started looking and needed a tailgate. I was like, you can't buy a tailgate for this truck, you guys. Like, we can't.
Yeah.
This is like, this guy's gonna spend $100,000 redoing a $10,000 car.
Yeah.
It's weird, like, because there's things like that, the weird stuff, that at that time when you were messing with it, they had value, kind of.
Well, they did. They were still usable.
Packards, you know what I mean, had value. And I guess some Packards still do. But, man, I mean, that's where it started for me was my great-grandma. We had her old car, and it was a 36 Packard, four-door. Had the suicides on it. And my grandpa, it was in the garage at my parents' house where they still live. And it would, like, there'd be rat's nests in it sometimes, and I used to fucking go in there, and it was scary because there were snakes in there sometimes. But once a week, he would fire that son of a gun up and pull it out of the garage, and we'd go taking off down the road in it.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, like, being blown away when he sold it to some dudes that, like, demo derby raced or something.
No.
And I was just like, and, like, in hindsight, years later, I was like, do you ever think, Grandpa, that, like, maybe we shouldn't have sold the Packard? He goes, oh, do you mean, have I seen them sell for $100,000 on on Barrett Jackson? Because he watches the auction now. I was like, yeah, that's what I mean. He's like, absolutely. Yeah. But you didn't know then. At that time, it was a couple $1,000 car, you know?
A few years before my grandpa passed, my dad's dad, we were sitting at the kitchen table, and of course he's kind of farm guy all of his life, and he grew up during a depression and everything. And you know, I had this hot rod bug, and his own son, my uncle, really had it. Like I said, my dad kind of had it, but mom tamped it back. Grandpa asked me, he goes, "If those old cars that you're so interested in and you keep dragging home, what would be your favorite?" And I said, "Oh, I'd have to say 41 Willys." And he goes, "What in the world would you want with that?"
Yeah.
Now, he's an old man that had to drive stuff like that back in that
Yeah, that was just a normal car.
He said, biggest piece of junk. He started going on and on and on about no power, the four-cylinder, blah, 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 and how much of a piece of crap they were. Well, that's the perfect body for a drag car for a gasser now. Grandpa was explaining all that to him. But, you know, kind of moving forward, how the Ford thing came around was, well, I did have, when I was probably in my mid-20s, I bought a 64 Fairlane had been a California car, and it turned out I put it back stock. It was a two-door post car. Learned how to work on it. It was an early 289 5-bolt pattern bell housing, so it was pretty limited on what you could do with it, but that turned out to be a beautiful car when I was done, and drove it back and forth to work every day. That was the daily driver for probably 3 or 4 years. And then kind of fast forward, so it gets into a whole nother story, but end up moving from up north to Kansas City after meeting a group of guys in St. Joe that I ran with, and they did several custom cars. Hung out in their shop, worked with them, got myself motivated, moved down here, bought a 56 Mercury, bought, let's see, that would have been an 02. No, it was 05. So I had the 56 Mercury that I still have. It's a 2/3 of the way done project that I've lost motivation in, but still have that car. Learned a lot about Fords on it. But everything prior to that, with the exception of the Fairlane, the Nova, everything else had been GM up until 07.
Yeah.
And then 05 when I bought the Mercury, 07's when I really started working on it. And then some things happened that I didn't like happen with GM, and I kind of switched everything over to Fords. And then
you see when you're like, I mean, I got that Econoline from you, and that was from your company, your fleet vehicles.
Yeah.
And now you have the truck,
the 57 Ford truck,
the
Mercury, the 70 Ford pickup,
Oh, you do still have the 70. Todd
Yeah.
Daly. Todd had the ability, which is what I love about him. Could have went to any car dealership, domestically speaking. Like nothing. He
Mm.
wouldn't buy a crazy foreign car, anyways. I don't think. But he could have went and bought any pickup truck he wanted to drive and been fine. But instead, what he chose to do was drive a 70s Ford pickup around that caught fire on him once.
Yeah.
Which is what's great about. I love it. I love that. I love that you're just like, yeah, no, I just like this. So I'm gonna drive this thing. Middle of summer, he's running his business, driving around with his earpiece on, talking to you on the phone, and you're like, are you in that old ass truck? Yeah, I
Yeah.
sure am.
Yeah.
Just sweating.
That's how I grew up. I didn't have air
Yeah.
conditioning until I was 30 years old.
Shit, I still don't have AC and nothing.
You know, that even in a house, I mean, that's just, I don't know. I'm 55 now. I enjoy the comfort of the power steering and the windows and the AC and all that. It's also a whole bunch of other crap underneath the hood to work on. And
Right.
when you got a family, and actually I'm getting older, so I do enjoy the AC at night.
Yeah.
But I just think about it. My parents, grandparents, all them, they didn't
Never
have
had
that
AC,
stuff.
yeah.
You don't miss what you don't have.
Right.
I mean, and you know, those are luxuries. But yeah, the 70, it actually came out real good. I mean, mechanically, that's the part that attracts me to this stuff. It isn't really what it looks like. I mean, I enjoy the custom stuff. I love looking at it. I love the shiny paint. I love all that. It's not that I can't afford to go that direction with it. I'm more about, and always have been, maybe that'll change as I get older, but more about, can I make it run? Can I make it work?
Yeah.
And that, I think, comes from being at the farm, because there was a million things at the farm pretty much during this time of the year. The welder or the shop lights were probably not going to get turned off until around 11 or 12 o'clock at night.
Right, because
You
you're
were just
repairing
fixing
everything.
something,
Yeah.
you know. And I don't regret any of that. I don't regret living or growing up that way at all. I feel like it was like going to college. Whenever, by the time I was 18, I already knew a whole lot more than a lot of people even know now,
Right.
or my age.
Yeah. No, it's that's a wild thing. I have a buddy that's a farmer, and he's always, I watch everything he's done. But even me, right? Like I work on cars all day, and then I come home half the time, or I stay late at work to work on cars. I do love it. And there's also a thing where, earlier you were talking about like the people that know every little detail, where it's like, this is the dude that I can't do it. I'm not a dork. Like,
Yeah.
and I'm not saying being a dork is bad. What I'm saying is, artistically speaking, I can't sit there and dork out and be like, this is the 52 Chevy. And like Eric knows all that shit about trim and everything.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's cool. Like, but if I knew all that, I would in my brain, I could never take it and use it for something else, you know?
Right.
And people all the time are like, you don't know about this? And I'm like, nah, I thought you were a car builder. Like, I am, but like, do you think all painters know about every artist ever made? Like,
Yeah.
I can't know everything.
Yeah.
I can't keep all that knowledge in my brain and then still know all this useful stuff that isn't, hey, this is how you cut this thing out and put it onto that. You know? It's a visual thing.
And the custom stuff, I certainly look at those guys that do that. The stuff that you guys done with Eric's car, which congratulations, by the way, you guys winning that.
Oh, I was so
award.
stoked. I talked a little shit earlier in the week at one of the lowrider shops to my man Rob. I told him I was about to whoop that ass.
Yeah.
And they were just laughing at me. But then it was cool. Like, Eric and I have built a lot of cars together now in 20 years. And, like, to be able to take that car and do what we did to it at the time that we did it, and,
Yeah.
like, we were sitting down talking about, like, we couldn't even begin to think how many hours we spent doing that, you know? And then, like, to go and take it to something that's kind of out of our element, you know what I mean? We're not, I'm like a chameleon. I'll go into any car scene thing and I know people there, and that just comes from working in the industry, right? Like, that's part of me being a shop guy.
Right.
But like for Eric, who is like not a low rider, like knows about low riding, but isn't like going to low riding meets and all that. For us to take that car there and then it be like those guys respect what we've done so much is pretty cool.
No, I think it is, and I wish I was a little broader with what I looked at and could appreciate more of
Right.
that type of thing. Yeah, it blows my mind what's done with the paint and what you guys have done with that car. You know, I didn't have that imagination when I seen this flat black and scallops. I mean, the scallops are like embedded in my brain of what his 60 did look like.
No, right. When he first got that, I was like, yo, dude, because I used to have this like die cast that was literally the guy must have seen that die cast from like the early 2000s and like painted after that. But it was all red interior, flat black, scallops with a red roof, and it's like, what are we doing here, Eric?
Yeah.
Like, what is you traded the car? You traded the gasser station wagon we built for this.
Yeah.
And it's like, yes. And it's like, okay, well, what are we doing? You know?
Well, and the exposure to the custom thing for me, my uncle had a car that I think was either owned by Don Thompson or one of the foreigners or something. My uncle had one up there. It was a 46 Ford that was radically customized.
Yeah.
And it was around the farm. My uncle he painted it and fixed it all up. It was around the farm, you know, probably from the time I was like 3 till, I don't know, 15. Hard top convertible. I mean, all kinds of crazy stuff on this thing. Carson top, I guess, is what they call that.
Right.
Now. But that kind of inspired me to do that. But I also knew myself well enough to know that my patience, especially when I was young, to do body work or anything like that, it just didn't exist.
Right. You're just more mechanically inclined than there's like an artistic line. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and that gene got left out whenever I was kicked out of the womb. I don't have any artistic ability at all.
But you but you are a person who like you can entrust people. Like, for instance, you know, hey Nico.
Oh yeah.
You and I are, and I'm very good in that way too. That I sort of ride the middle, and I'm very mechanically inclined, but I'm also artistically minded. But I know that I can go, hey, I like what you do, and you know what I'm about, so you just do that because I can't do it.
Yeah. And with Nico's a great example. I can appreciate great art. I can appreciate some of this stuff blows me away that now that the internet's there, I can see custom stuff that was done 50, 60 years ago that I didn't know about by reading Hot Rod magazine when I was a little kid, because I did. I read every issue all the way back into the 50s because my uncle had them all. I seen that stuff, but I just knew I didn't possess maybe the welding skills I might have been able to pull off, but the rest of it to make it come out look good, I hadn't perfected or been around anything like that. Like I said, my uncle's 46. It inspired me a little bit. Let's see, I guess it was the late 90s. I had started a business in St. Joe. This is crazy. I got to talk about this a little bit. That job or business I had me dressed in a suit.
Now, what kind?
Much every day. Financial services.
Okay, so for context, now you are in the fire suppression industry.
Now I am now.
That's what Todd owns is part of a fire suppression company. He does paint booths at my work. He does restaurant stuff. He's beyond other crazy things that he's told me about.
Involved in a lot of stuff now. But at that time, I was in sales, heavily in sales. I've been trained extensively in sales, some securities licensing, stuff like that. So, but I was going through a really rough time in a marriage, a real bad one. And I was sitting in my office, and there's a kind of a blacktop street that kind of went down in the valley. At the lower part of this valley was a garage, and I could tell these guys were renting it. And I could see out my windows every day while I was there working. See them down there dragging cool stuff in, 56 Olds, a 54 Ford pickup, 51 Mercury. Jeff would come in and out in a 70 Ford pickup that was all slam pro street style with a 460 and a great big 871 on top of it, and a set of steamrollers under the back. And I'm sitting there watching these guys, and they'd go down and work during the day, and then they'd leave, And the whole time I was there, they would be down working. And now I'm having a particularly bad day. This is like a life-changing event. I'm gonna get a divorce, and I'm in a suit, and I get up, lock the door on the office, and walk down the hill and introduce myself to these guys. And that day was the day the 57-olds came in, out of the weeds. Had been in the weeds probably 30 years. And mind you, I had put everything to do with cars on hold for 5 years while I was trying to start that business. I'm going through this life change. These guys are working on hot rods. There's a torch there, and that back bumper really needs to come off. And I'm underneath the car in a suit. After I introduced myself to him, I said, hand me that. And I laid down in the suit on the garage floor. And from that point forward, I was known as Weird Neighbor Todd because they didn't know who I was.
You're just a weird dude in the suit that showed up and cut the bumper off the Oldsmobile one day.
And I hung out there for about 3 years after that. And we did finish Brad's Mercury, the 51. I helped with it. I helped with Yoakum's Model A. That's been the ham drags 100 times. Hetty's pickup, 54. Worked on a lot of stuff in there. At that time, I got out of that business and just started working in the fire business in the same position my son's in right now as a service tech. And I, for whatever reason, went and bought a butter yellow 68 Dart GT, and that was what my going to run around car was, going to Des Moines with them.
Your fun car, your little nice run car.
And
now, did your Dart have it slant 6 in it?
No, but it had an anemic small block in it that knocked real bad after we drove it too hard. But yeah,
as a Dodge does.
Yeah, and I hadn't had very many Chrysler products. That was I think the first and last one. So moving forward through the 2000s, that's where this other stuff came around. Those guys in St. Joe, they took me in at a time that I needed a community like that to hang out with. We're still very good friends. We just spent the weekend in Joplin last weekend together. We celebrated 20 years of going to the ham drags together, which is Spam Drags now.
Yeah.
And, Mike Morris, all those guys up north, up around St. Joe, they were friends then. We're still friends today. That's because awesome. Of those bonds that were made back then.
What year would that have been?
That was 99.
Oh, so the time that you were in St. Joe doing that, I was in a punk band for a brief period where that convention center is downtown, the old convention center. One of them had like a little punk venue right there, but I was in a band called the American Youth Report. Shout out to the American Youth Report.
Wow.
We recorded an album in Iowa, and then I quit the band. As one does when they're 19, 20, 21 years old. I guess I was 21. Still to this day, only strip club I ever been in was Pinky's. Isn't that the name of it? Pinky's in St. Joe?
No, Blondie's.
Blondie's, whatever. It only costs $1 to get in every, probably not the best place to go for your first strip club, because there was the one lady that had the deep voice who was kind of muscular. Then there was another lady who had several gunshot and knife scars. And then there was a pregnant lady. And my buddies are all like, this is great. And the guys in the band, I was like, yeah, I don't know where you guys brought me, but I just remember it being $1 to get in. I always thought that was odd. $1 cover charge to get in the strip club. Blondie's, that was the name of it.
Yeah, I think it was in there once, and that was enough.
Similar. You probably had a similar experience.
Yeah.
Blondie's. Now you have the Rowdy Texan is what you've named the truck, right?
Yeah, that truck was put together over in Lubbock when I lived over there.
And it's gasser style.
Yeah, gasser style.
You got 2 gassers right now.
Yeah.
But the Dirty Bird's kind of bitching because you got that weird old supercharger on it. And
I kind of wanted to do that car up like a kid in the mid-'60s would have done it. Somebody with maybe a budget, but maybe a little bit of money behind them, because there was stuff like that going on.
Yeah, recently you've updated it with some cool parts that are the stuff you can't see.
Yeah.
You know, you had the rear end thing. After all that time, I had no idea you were driving that car with like not having redone the rear end, and then
Oh no, it's had a I put a 9 inch. Well, that's another whole discussion, but that's a 9 inch out of a '58 Ford,
yeah,
and it did have. I just didn't put. I didn't put. I put new internals in it, but
but
I
no
didn't put new
axles.
axles.
Yeah,
So the axles gave away right away, which kind of was by design, except it wasn't because of money. I left them in there because they fit,
right.
and I hadn't decided whether I wanted to stay with a 28 spline. So there was a whole lot of stuff going on with
Yeah,
that. That car started out as an automatic car, so that might not have been such a big deal. But then I got talked into a TKX, so that's what's under there now is a 5 speed,
right.
and a 28 spline and a 5 speed with 10.5 inch tire on it and a little bit of power. It just doesn't get along well with 28 spline axles. So
Yeah,
we're kind of fighting that this year, but finally it's starting to make some power. I've kind of gotten some things. I had to talk to the blower guy, which is cool because when I was in Lubbock, I met a guy over there that had some supercharged 57 Fords, Pat
cool.
Fleshman. Turns out the guy I bought the blower from in Southern California and Pat Fleshman pretty much do business together like daily.
Oh, cool.
So now I can call Pat
And know all about what you got
yeah,
going on.
yeah, he's helped a whole lot.
Well, didn't you get? Did you get your transmission from Brian?
I did.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my buddy Brian has Accurate Performance. Brian rules.
Yeah.
He's definitely like the in town. Now he's got that machine shop.
Yeah.
So it's like becoming a great resource for the community for sure.
Well, he was spot on about the right route to go with that, and the TKX would fit that car, and there is no stock tunnel in a Falcon.
Oh,
There's no room.
yeah, and he's like, he's one of those guys that like mechanically wise, he's like the rain. He's like to me, he's like Rain Man.
Yeah.
Because I couldn't tell you how many times I drove over to his shop to buy parts.
Yeah.
Because we've known each other forever, but that's how we really got to know each other. I would roll in there and I would buy all of his takeoff motorcycle parts because he used to build quite a few bikes for people.
Yeah.
And he's always got shit around that's like something that was on somebody's car that you can buy for a good price.
Yeah.
And I pull up there one day in my van and it's like runs like shit. And he's like, dude, what is with your van? Like, and I'm like, I don't know. And he's like, Jesus Christ, you're missing half the shit off the carburetor. So he went and got some wire and he like rigged it all up for me. He's like, this will get you by, but you got to do something about this, dude. Every time I go there and whatever, he's like, what are you driving, man? Like, what is this piece of let me make this run better.
No, Brian's been good to me, and on that deal, he was outstanding to help me. Bell housing, the whole works, and then, before you told me about him, I had talked to him as a referral from Mike Morris up in St. Joe when I cut one of my slicks, loading it on a trailer, getting ready to go to the ham drags.
Oh shit!
What 3-4 years ago, and I call him at like 4:45.
Yeah.
The night before I'm getting ready to leave, he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll hook you up. I'll get you some here tomorrow." And so he didn't have to do that. He didn't know me. He just knew the names I was throwing around, and he actually did help me with that situation. So I usually try to call him anytime anything's unusual that I'm trying to locate.
Yeah.
Right away.
Oh yeah. Well, even that, like, there's a thing, like I tell people, it's like you can buy whatever on the internet. You know what I mean? Easily done. And or you can go to a place where a guy sells that product, knows about that product, and if you have a problem with that product, he can help you. And if something isn't right, he can help you. If he also puts them in things, so he knows what he's doing. And it's like you're paying for that. Like the customer service that he offers is uncanny. The cars he builds are top notch. The stuff that comes out of their shop is like wild. And and he's been there so long. Like he's been around forever, dude. Like back in the KC Creations days, he worked there. Like Bryce has always been around. He builds rad motorcycles. Like he's just a rad dude, but he really knows like everyone that works for him. They all like I go down there half the time. I'll like just roll in there like, hey, can you guys like put this in the parts washing thing for me? Like, yeah, I guess. Like,
well, it used to be places like that around everywhere. I mean, There's
Yeah.
places like him around more frequently. At least when I lived in St. Joe or grew up around that area, there was Leverton's, there was other places, Performance Auto Parts, there was this, there was that. That type of thing's for the most part gone.
Yeah.
And when I went looking for an engine builder for the Falcon, Mark Shelton, somebody that actually, after I got to talking to him a little bit, found out we were kind of hanging around as teenagers in the same areas, watching all the street racing and stuff
cool.
that was going on around St. Joe at that time, which was insane. I mean, I've seen a race-only Belvedere get blown up in the middle of 36 highway drag racing one night, and we got to talking. He was there, so he went on. Mark's up in Stewartsville. Of course, that's who I'm going to have build the Ford because he's a Ford guy, and he built Ford Motors. He went on with some race teams and worked with them later. So, some resources that were locally. I tried to do that instead of just picking up a catalog and ordering a crate motor. And do it here. Got with Brian. And several guys around Kearney that helped me with the Falcon, putting it together. There was 3 revisions of that car, believe it or not. An automatic plan, then a T5 plan that lasted only about 8 months with a junkyard V8 in it, and that was kind of the mock-up for what it is now. And of course, everything had to change whenever I done this, including rear springs and everything. So the car, mechanically, there isn't anything on it that's even a Falcon anymore, or original Falcon, except maybe the steering box. That the rest of it's something else.
Yeah. And it's awesome. And then you had Nico do those old graphics on it, the distress, the big old dirty bird on the side.
I just wanted it to look like it rolled out.
It really does look like an old drag car, which is awesome.
That's what we were after.
And now it sounds so crazy when you hear the supercharger, and you're like, wait, what the hell is that? Because it has because that's like it's all.
That's a early 60s.
Right.
McCulloch Paxton. It's actually a Paxton. It's when the name switched. So they did McCulloch's on everything prior to 62. But Mickey Thompson, Carol Shelby were playing around with those, and Shelby went on to do it on some of the Mustangs, and I think it was 65.
Right.
And that was what I was going for, is like if a kid had a little money, managed to scavenge a small block Ford with that Paxton on it, this is what he would have.
Right.
And he'd try to do this with it. I mean, that was my whole idea.
You
theme
nailed
of
it.
the car.
Yeah. And now, last year, unfortunately, the drags, there was a bunch of rain, and we didn't get to do as much as we would have liked.
Friday night was going real well, test and tune, and then Saturday, I don't know. I don't think I've ever seen a storm do that, but I must have pissed somebody off real good because, just about 3 miles up the road to the west, it wasn't raining, but it parked itself and kept refiring over the track to the point where we're watching radar and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Thinking we can get a race off because it's not raining right over there. And that went on for several hours.
Oh, I remember. I was there. We sat there,
insane.
and then finally it was like, yeah, it stopped raining, but we'll never get the moisture out of this area.
It was unfortunate. They've struggled up there this year. They've had a weather pattern that's moved through. They've gotten 3. They got 4 races off. Last night they finally got 1 going. And I think that won't be a problem so much for us in September now. We're past all this goof. I think we're kind of
it seems like I think we're going to be, I'm hoping that we're good this year. Tell us a little bit about exactly what,
Well, the Rumbles, it's evolved too. It's moved from 1964 and older up to 68 and older this year, just because we didn't want to miss anything that was cool but still in that right era. Well, we didn't want the show to be, we wanted it to be as close to something like I had seen down at the Day of the Drags. That's what my vision for it was. Although in this market, there might be a few of those old 6-cylinder dragsters or some Y-block guys. Couple things. One, if they're out there, I haven't seen a lot of them that'll go out and run it down a drag strip.
Right.
Or 2, I have to remember when I was going to the Day of the Drags, that was over 10 years ago.
Right.
Some of those guys are gone.
Well, and it's something we've talked about a lot, right? How in 2000 you could have a car show that was all pre 64, and it was great because cars were abundant and all this thing. But as time goes on, the world changes, but with that, people's everything comes back around to being popular. But right now we're in this weird mold of where people like stuff from the 50s and the 40s. I'm not seeing as much hot rodding, like in quotation marks, like traditional stuff, know. But there's a lot of there's kids buying like 76 Malibus. Well, and then that's the car that they saw because their grandpa had that, and they think it's the coolest thing. And that's like Duke's car. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's bitching. But it's like, okay, so are we going to exclude this kid, or are we going to take him as an example and say, oh, maybe we need to shift our thinking some?
Yeah, and if it encourages somebody that's in their, well, it doesn't matter how old they are, if it encourages somebody to go work on something that's old. I mean, I dig these programs. Yeah, it might be put on a little bit or whatever, like Vice Grip Garage. He's going and dragging stuff out of the woods and getting it running and driving it back home.
Right.
And actually what he's doing there is he's actually making a show that's kind of entertaining on what you're going to encounter if you did go by that car on the fence row. You're going to find brake problems. You got to find out why it was parked there to start with. Kind of back to what you were saying, the cutoff, 68. Yeah, am I going to appreciate something newer than that coming in? Oh, I might possibly, and tell you to park it on the lane coming in so people can take a look.
Right.
What I was trying to capture was a time in drag racing right where it got out of the reach for
the individual to do it when corporate money came into drag racing.
Right. Yeah. Did I grow up on Snake and Mongoose? Hell yeah. And that was 100% commercial. And that was kind of the beginning of the end for drag racing when it came to being in reach for most people. Yeah, there was small time stuff, just like, there was a whole era I didn't talk about, hanging out at the dirt track and the small circle track stuff. I was still involved, even though I couldn't personally do it at the time myself. I'd go help guys pit. I'd go work on their cars. Most of them were Fords. But looking at what people come to our show, and what doesn't matter whether the guy's 76 years old, and he's coming there to reminisce about something he might see run down the drag strip that he used to have.
Right.
And because that happened a couple of years ago. I mean, it was kind of a neat moment for me to talk to him because he was there bringing a car that he had just restored that he wanted his wife to ride in. It was one they had dated in, and he wanted to drag race it. And he was in his 70s. It was a neat story when he told it to us. But then to also see young people come around and be interested. I had at Spam Drags, the hood was open on the Falcon, as it usually is. And some 18-year-old kid that's interested in superchargers, but really kind of interested in the history of them more than he is this tuner stuff that's going on now. He was asking all kinds of questions about this. And I said, well, this is good to look at. What you need to find is something that was on a Studebaker back in the 50s, because this isn't new technology. This is technology that's World War II stuff, that pilots came out with. So, during the war, not pilots, but designers came out with for airplanes. So the Rumble being 68 and older, I'm trying to capture that time. What I didn't want it to be was a Sonic car show, a Mustang and Corvette show. Nothing against either one of those, but you know what I'm talking about.
You're creating it's almost like an art installation, but also a competition of this specific thing, right? And it's no different than like my thing. And we've talked about this, and you know it, is that, like, I could see that change in the car show part, right? Like, that works for doing this. Yeah. That's perfect. You can do a thing like that and include, there's a lot of people that build those cars, and gassers have become a pretty popular thing in the last few years, which is awesome. It's great. And now is the time to have this event. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because one day you'll have it, and it'll get small, and it'll get big, and it'll get small.
Sure.
But like with the car show thing, like that's my thing. Is like I see so many people get discouraged, and like trying to promote people to work on cars. Like
Yeah.
I can't like just Duke is an example. I can't cut Caden out. You know what I mean?
Oh,
I
no.
have to find like, and there's so many other kids like, hey, this kid's got a Honda Civic that he's building. Well, you know what? That's what I fucking started in.
Yeah.
Was a Honda CRX, right? And I used to street race it, and I had a Japanese only motor in it, and all this wild stuff. So it's like, but somehow I got from there to like where I am now, right?
Yeah.
And it's and that's the biggest thing, and you recognize that too, you know, and you're giving it to them by saying like, hey, look, you can go find some old shitty thing, and then you might, just by going to the drag strip, they might go, oh, well, I can come here on a Friday night with whatever
Yeah.
and do the grudge race.
Yeah, they can, and that track's open to those sorts of things for every event weekend, except
for this one.
This one's this one they've gave us our time to do our thing, and I think people enjoy it. The track does meet the era, so to speak. It's very 60s. It was built in '65. They've made some improvements to it. They made a major one a couple years or last year with new asphalt, the whole track. So it's an investment and a risk for the owner and a risk for the operator, which is Jeremy Van Meter. But they put a lot of faith in me and that this is going to go off. It's a good weekend for them, and it has been. It has been even whenever it rained. I mean,
even when it rained, everybody still showed up. Everybody hung out, and we were there all day, and we got cool footage. And
yeah, if I had 4 complaints, I'd be surprised. I mean, people think that you can do something with controlled rain. If I was able to do that, I wouldn't be putting on a drag race. I'd be busy controlling the weather.
Yeah, I'd be with you. I'd be charging China to do weather bombs.
Yeah.
No, I'm looking forward to it. I had a blast last year with Mark coming out and him and I working together with his drone to like get cool shots and like.
Well, that picture
awesome.
right there is Mark's from the drone, and and that was Nico's inspiration from the photo that Mark took.
Right.
You know, so
yeah. No, that's cool because Kaz is so into that drone stuff, and for me to be able to like play with his drone for a minute, not fly it because I'm terrified of him, but the camera part, and him and I was showing him, I'm like, oh look, we can switch your settings so it looks like it's taking cinema style footage now.
Well, we've got to get you guys set up to where you do all of that stuff period correct. So that means one of you has like lay on a wing of a biplane and fly over the track.
Yeah, we'll have to get Kaz will have to get his pilot's license next, but then he'll just start smuggling stuff. That'll be his vibe. And so the drag show, it's coming up, which is one of the not the only reason I wanted you to come on, but I wanted to do it before the drag races this year because they're coming up in a few weeks, the 16th and the 17th in Bethany, Missouri.
Yeah. And
it's the Rumble at Thunder Valley because it's Thunder Valley Speedway. Yeah. And you can go. There's nothing in Bethany,
Rumble64.com has all the information on it.
And then you're on Instagram. There's a Rumble Drags Instagram.
Yeah.
There's a
Facebook.
famous Facebook. Instagram. Yeah, you can find, there's a Rumble group, which is a Facebook group Todd has started. That's like a thing to like, it's just a resource for everyone that is sort of in the culture to be a part of and know like, hey, I go on there and post video links all the time, and Todd will share some stuff that I do, and other people will share their events, and it's like a way for everybody to have it's almost like a community message board that specifically you can look at and see, and people are pretty active. It's a pretty active group for being a Facebook group with people because most of the people are from our area. If
I had time to start a blog there's the Hamboard for a lot of that. I mean, I don't want to even pretend like it's anything even close to
that. There's enough of that stuff. Yeah. We don't need any more of that.
But if you need a part or if you're looking for something, there's 1,700 people in that Rumble group now or something.
Right,
like
that. And like I said, most of them seem to be from our specific. If you drew a big 250-mile circle around downtown here, if you went 250 out and just drew a circle, they're probably all within that area.
Yeah.
Which is also cool because that's a lot of fucking people to be into a specific sort of subculture, even though they're so like everybody's so separated now in like these little niche groups.
Yeah. Yeah, but if you're looking for parts, I've thrown it up there before. I've seen some stuff sell that guys posted that they had for sale, and they sold it there with. I think the whole marketplace thing and all that. I hate even going on there because even if I find what I want, is the person going to be a flake whenever I get ready to get a hold of them?
Yeah. And then you have to deal with the guy like me who's like, "Is that your bottom dollar? You sure you won't take $5 for this, sir?"
Yeah. It's not eBay.
Yeah. And I've never even bought anything off eBay in my entire life. People have always told me you should use eBay, and I'm just like, I don't know, man. I kind of like the thrill of the hunt. Like, I'm sort of old school in that way that, like, if I don't find it, then I guess I didn't need it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and you got a show coming up Sunday.
Yeah, a week from today, because we're filming this on the Sunday, but Labor Day weekend is the Black Moon Revival at the 403. But that's my thing. Like, I wanted, there's another show in town that all of us used to be affiliated with, Greaserama, and they switched down to only being Friday and Saturday. And they're very strict on the rules, which is great, but times have changed, and if you're out in the world and you're working on cars professionally and you're going to all these different shops and all these different events, you start to talking to everybody, which I did. I've spent the last 5 years just going around and being a part of all this stuff. And then the one thing everybody says is, man, I just miss it. I miss the old days. I miss just hanging out. So I said, cool, we'll do that. We'll make a place where you can come. It's not about making money. It's about, $5 to register your vehicle. That's all that's doing is going back to pay for the flyers and shit.
Yeah.
Artie stepped up that owns the 403. He's rules. Artie's awesome. He's helped me out. He's covered some of it. He paid I got the road blocked off, which was like, yo, dude, I didn't even know what that took. Like, I took off a day of work. I've been to 15 different Wyandotte County government offices. I've talked to all these people. I've been into the roads people. I had to go to the municipal courthouse. I had to do all kinds of things. I had to, like, agree to, like, do it this way. They opted to help me out this year with a block party permit. But next year, I have to go to a traffic company, and they've shown me what I have to have done and have, like, this thing done up. Like they do for this other event. So they showed me what they did, but that will, I can almost get, I can, like, technically it can be a festival after that. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's been wild dealing with the government here in Wyandotte County, but they have helped me. So that's cool. But I'm looking forward to having a place that's just like, yo, man, if you think it's cool, then fucking, you know what? That's awesome. And I think it's cool. I think it's cool. If you have a car or a thing and you love it and, like, you think it's awesome, that's all that matters. Because how many people see them vans I drive and build and then are like, that's fucking stupid. Like, why do you drive this van? You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's cool, but, like, I love them. And if you want to ask me why I love them, I'd love to tell you about it. No different than you love to tell people about why you love drag racing so much, But, like, now what's missing is I go to all this shit, Todd, and I know all these people, right? I know guys that build lowriders. I know guys that build Hondas. I know guys that build race cars only. I know dudes that do hot rods. I know dudes that only do customs. I know people that build motorcycles of all kinds. But then I talk to them, and I'm like, you don't know Larry? Like, how do you not know Larry? Like that day when I told you, like, you don't know Brian? Like, Brian rules. You of all people should know Brian, So I want to get it back to how it used to be, where everyone in the culture, like, we need something that brings everybody together, and and you can't have limitations to do that, So now you'll go and you'll find some guy that drives some big ass truck, and that's his steez, but he also loves drag racing. So he's going to go, oh shit, I can I had no idea about this because this isn't really a part of our thing normally. But I'm glad I found this.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, just the 55-year-old guy in me says, those people will find each other, and if they're right for each other, they will
Yeah.
find that camaraderie that's there, and if they're in the car culture for the wrong reason, they'll also find themselves by themselves. I mean, and
Right.
that's perfectly. I've been okay being. When I moved to Lubbock and wanted to be in the car culture, it took me a minute to find one over there. And Keith Fox, I found him, and he's
Right.
all over the place. Everybody knows Keith, Dirty South Gassers, and
Yeah.
all the stuff that he's done with Drag Week and all those sorts of things. But it took me a minute to find that right group,
Right.
and it was diverse over there. It was, rich oil cotton farmers
Yeah.
that had some really, really, really nice stuff, and then there was kind of some of the rat rods and the later model stuff over there too.
Yeah.
But it took a while to find it because,
Yeah.
and I think if we make ourselves available and approachable, the worst thing anybody doing a show or putting on a show can make them is to make or have anybody associated with it that's going to make it unapproachable for some
Right.
reason. Put somebody off because of their attitude or their I don't know, silliness about a particular feeling towards things. I have my own preferences when it comes to vehicles. There's
Right.
absolutely
We all
no
do.
doubt.
We all
But I
do.
have an appreciation for my son's OBS Ford that he's just really hung up on a 7.3 diesels.
Right. I don't understand
I
why,
don't- there's a
but
lot of
I
easier
know
ways
that
to make power.
they love them. They
Yeah.
love them,
But-
right? And no different than, we
Uh,
love what we love. Like, we always gonna love. Like, people often like get weirded out because I'm like, fuck, look at that Honda Civic, and they're like, what? And I'm like, I remember walking around a car show. I took some people to a car show a few years ago, and some of those people are still associated with this group, and some of them aren't. But the one thing all of them at that time said, I took them to a thing that was open to everyone. You know what I mean? And as we're walking around, it was just rag on it, rag on it, rag on it. And I turned around at one point, and I'm looking at this just totally bitching like import car, right? It's like a Nissan 240. It had all this weird J-spec shit that if you didn't know it, if you don't know about it, you know what I mean? It's just like whatever, but it's like a cool car. You know what I'm saying? And I'm like, whoa. And it's beautiful. Like nice cars. We were looking at all these nice cars, and it just kept being ragging on it, ragging on it, ragging on it. And finally, I turned around and I said, you'd think with all of these cars here, you might find one that you'd have something positive to say about. Why do you gotta keep? We don't have to rag on the stuff that we don't like. Like, that's one thing I've noticed about the car scene in the last few years. There's with like people have gotten this. Some people have this elitist attitude that they're like, they know what's best. And it's like, wait, you just know what you like, and like, we can like that. But like, if some guy hears you, like, it's nobody wants to hear somebody ragging on their car. That's why I try to stay in the positive. Like, there's always, we should, as a car guy, you should be able to go to any event, and no matter what car it is, there's got to be something on there that you dig.
Yeah. And the Rumble groups opened up their shows, the one whenever we do
Right.
these little pop-up things, and honestly, we do those because I want to stay connected to the car culture. And generally, my wife's playing wherever, in her band, she's playing wherever we're trying to do a pop-up.
Yeah.
Which means she's playing on a Saturday night or a Friday night, and I can't do a car show because I really kind of need to be there with her when she's
Right.
singing because I am running sound. So we do these little pop-up shows under the Rumble Group name, and that's to open it up for everything.
No, and they're bitching. And you go
Yeah.
there, and the last one you had, the one that was up in Smithville,
Yeah.
it was like, there was like brand new Camaro that was all tricked out. There
Yeah.
was muscle cars. There was vans. There was, I seen an S10. There's some C10s. There's
Yeah.
cars from the 50s. There's customs. There's hot rod. It's literally everything. And not a single person is mad at anybody.
No.
Everybody's having fun. And it's like, for years I hear people rag on like the Sonic car show, but it's like, well, you could take that concept and just put it in a cooler setting that isn't Sonic Drive-In, you know what I mean?
Yeah, right.
And then you have like you have a pretty bitchin' thing, which is what I'm basically doing. I'm
Yeah.
taking the Sonic car show and putting it at a pinball bar and having my buddies come. Dude, I'm setting the vibe here. We got a tarot card reader that's going to be there. I got pizza coming. I have Pat Cox, who Steve Foss made him agree yesterday to on video that he was going to bring the ice cream truck out. So Pat's going to bring the ice cream truck out. He better. If not, I'm going to release that video of him saying he would be there. But dude, it's just like, and there's not a single person who talks about coming to the Euro shows that isn't stoked on it. And I've heard nothing but like people being like, yo, looking forward to just coming and like not worrying, you know. And I didn't make any awards. I just kind of like, I asked you if I told you like, hey, you and Eric come up with something to give out, and you're gonna set up at it, and if you want to come find out about the Rumble Drags, you can see Todd in person, and if you got a car and you want to enter it, you can sign up that day. There's a car show at the Rumble Drags also. Yeah, it's not just for drag cars.
The back behind the starting line area with the at the Rumble is reserved for pre-68 and older cars. So if it's a correct looking car, because the whole idea is like have your wife go over and take a picture of you drag racing at an old track and everything in the background being period correct.
Right.
When was the picture taken? Was it taken in 68 or was it taken yesterday?
Right.
That's what I'm hoping to create with that, or what we have. We have got a lot of photos like that.
Yeah.
And that's, you know, as far as the magic goes, the show, the people that show up for it, that's the magic to why the Rumble still, this is the fifth one.
Yeah.
And will there be a sixth? Well, we'll see how the fifth one goes. I mean, that's how every year is. It's like when there's no interest anymore, then
you do something else.
We'll do something different.
Yeah.
I think the key thing for all of us to understand in the car culture is that when something's tired and old, you need to reinvent, or it's just going to keep.
It's just going to be tired and old. You got to do something new.
It's happened.
And that's, and that's why and that's why we're doing this year. Yeah. Me and Kelsey. It's because we needed something new. There's all these people also that don't know where the car scene is at, and they got a little spider tingling, you know, a little spidey sense going of wanting to find it, and they need to find their people inside that community. So I want to create a space for that. Yeah. I want to create a space that it's easy. Hey, come here. You like lowriders? Go talk to that man right there. Oh, you like hot rods? Well, here. Talk to one of these guys. They're cool. Yeah. You know. Oh, you want to do vans? Here, let me introduce you to these 7 guys that all have vans that are coming.
Right.
You know, the van thing is like, man, my buddy Jay Rigsby, he's got that old Hopcat van that used to be Tyler Gunn's.
Oh, yeah.
And Jay's like, every one of Jay's buddies out there in Independence, they've all bought in Dodge vans in the last month. Or it's like, Jesus, there's not going to be a Dodge van left. But Jason's coming up, you know, Brunskill. Yeah. Jason, man, that dude is that guy's everywhere. That dude loves cars.
He's legit.
He's legit. He rules, dude.
I see Jason all around here, and I've also seen him in the middle of Illinois driving that van 55 miles an hour when everybody else was going 70.
Yeah, you'll be somewhere, and all of a sudden, like, next thing, like, there's times where I didn't even know he was going to be somewhere, and I turn around, I'm like, holy shit, Jason's here. It's like, hey, you didn't call. Like, at my last Cars and Coffee, Jason's also the king of coming and then being like, well, I'm going to do all the rest of the things I want to do. And then 5 minutes later, everybody else shows up. Yeah. Like, that's what happened. He was there at 8 a.m. You know what I mean? He was there. He's there. If you say a time, Jason Brunskill is going to be the first dude in the door. We're talking about a dude that took 3 vans to the Van Nationals this year, specifically so he could have the bragging rights of saying, I brought 3 vans here. Yeah. And he was trying to take 4. It just didn't work out for him.
He's great. I enjoy him a lot.
Yeah. And shout out to the other guys. Harold, who's been on, he helps you. Mm-hmm. Eric is a big part. Yeah. Derek, Pat Lannis.
That's right. Yeah, as far as putting the show
Jim and Connie Green. Penny is a big part of helping. Yeah. Tina.
So, yeah, Chandler's
Amanda.
been there. Amanda's
Chandler.
been there. Yeah, so... they get it, and really our show is so easy to put on because we've got a good group of people coming.
Yeah.
I mean, they know what to expect when they get there. Um, I couldn't, the core folks that show up for the Rumble are outstanding people. I mean, really
Yeah.
good people. Get around and talk to them because they're guys that I seek out to hang out with if I go to Joplin or Sykeston or someplace else.
Right.
They're good people, and that community seems to drive that type of person to it. But yeah, I've had Jeremy Van Meter, Adam Burrows up in Bethany, of course Doug Dale. Uh, that's his track. He could be doing all kinds of things with it that weekend. He gives us one in September. He gives us that weekend to do with whatever we want to,
Right.
and he's not been difficult at all on. He's had to run extra power, so we have a band there. We do have the Popsicle Rebels coming this
Popsicle
year.
Rebels.
They were there a couple years ago. I had some people request them back.
Yeah,
And,
great. Those are
but
all great musicians.
local
Great
people,
band.
car people, they
Yeah.
get it. They
They love
understand it.
Even the people in that band are all car people.
Yeah.
Have always been car people and rock and roll people.
So
There's a shout out to Jim,
yeah,
formerly of the Rumble Jets.
Rumble
Best
Jets.
rockabilly band ever in Kansas City.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We've seen them several times.
Oh, they were great. That was like 18. At 18, I got a pompadour, dude, in high school. I was working at Jiffy Lube, so I wore mechanics button ups and mechanics pants every day, and had the sleeves cuffed. I wore creepers, and I was going to rockabilly shows, and I was like way ahead of my time for it. You know what I mean? Because even at that time, I'm still eternally hanging out with people 20 years older than me most of the time.
Yeah.
10 to 20 years older than me is everybody I hang out with.
Yeah.
But I was like the youngest person in the rockabilly scene back then. It was like, can't wait till I'm 21 and I can go to these shows finally.
Well, no, I appreciate you, plugging the event, talking to me about it, and
Oh,
setting
dude,
all
of
this
course,
up.
man. Thank you for coming on.
Yeah.
Like, we talk all the time. Todd's a really good friend, and anytime I need something, he's there to help me. And I think that's true about anybody in our friend group. You're always down to help, and that whole time I've been doing this show, you've done nothing but every time I talk to you, you go, "What do you need from me?" And then really, I took your advice on what you just said about the Rumble Drags, and it's, oh, what can I do to make this the easiest thing to do for the first time? I don't need to overcomplicate this with a bunch of like wild stuff, right? Like it just needs to be, let's make a thing. Let's start easy with like cool stuff. Like, we'll put that touch on it. We'll get like the tarot card reader. Like that's something different, right? Like people are going to dig that. Like I got some vendors coming. Dennis Jackson from St. Louis. In their, how he even ended up being my friend is weird, but like, I mean, we met Dennis me and Nico did that Gnarly Magazine contest, and that year for John's show, and we went up to Torque Fest, and then Dennis is there, and we had both independently been talking to Dennis over Facebook a little. And then Dennis responded quite well. In person, Dennis did not barely say 2 words to us the whole time. So I was the asshole, and I was like, "Oh, Dennis will come up there and hold his helmet for you, John." And John made Dennis get on the stage, and Dennis was like, "What the fuck, dude?" Like, he didn't want to talk to anybody, But since then, like, Dennis has become a good friend, and he lives in St. Louis, and I call him up, and I can talk to him about whatever, He just got a van. He's excited. But he was like, so stoked to come and set up and bring the guys from, oh shit, what's the name of that band? It's escaping me. Hollywood.
Homeless in Hollywood.
Homeless in Hollywood. There we go. A bunch of those guys are coming to because there's Greaser Rama's that weekend. There's so much going on, car stuff, that all these people are going to be in town. Davenport's going on, so a couple buddies are going up there, and they're going to let everybody know, hey, come down to Kansas City.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. I've been promoting Greaser Rama too, and telling people like, hey, you can go to that thing, and then Sunday you can come to our thing, and you'll have a full weekend of rad shit going on.
Well, you were talking about, I guess Nick's coming back. I didn't know that. I talked to him today, but I didn't ask him about next weekend. And it must be some of the Metal Flakes coming back.
Oh yeah, the Metal Flakes will definitely I think some of them are coming. I think a big group of people from St. Louis are coming. So
Okay.
Dennis's car club, the what's their name of their car? The Poor Boys? Is that their name? What's the name of their
I
car
should
club?
know.
It's just
No.
slipping my mind. I'm having a brain fart day today.
No, it's not the Poor Boys.
Decent
It's,
Boys.
Decent
The
Boys.
Decent Boys.
Yeah.
The Decent Boys. My bad.
Yeah.
There's that one guy remember the one guy from Dennis's club talked shit to me and Harold at that thing, and we were like, it's like, yo, Dennis, what the
Yeah.
hell? They made that guy wear a dress around for like a day.
Yeah. No, I think you're doing it right. Is don't carry too much weight the first few shows, the first couple shows. I mean, and that could be too much help. I went through that a little bit.
Yeah.
Because it turns into not so much help and more work in some ways. So.
Yeah, I just want to make it. I didn't charge vendors. I just invited cool people that I know to like. It's like, hey, support this and let's get something going, and then we'll see what it grows into. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's everybody wants. Everybody's hung up on all these like extravagance and like, it'd be cool to do like a thing like John Wells does at Torquefest, but I also know from helping John how much that takes. And John buys and sells records and toys and stuff, but he does that, and also a full-time job is Vintage Torquefest, and he had 3 of them going, and it's like, dude, how are you doing this? Like, there's so much to keep straight because you're planning in advance. And we did this one pretty quick this year. It wasn't even 6 months, I think, maybe that we had to plan it all. So like going into next year, it's going to be a cakewalk, because I'll do at least 2. And then we'll see after, like, again, you got to give her 2 and then see after the second one.
Yeah, I think you'll have a real good idea this year. I mean, Labor Day's a wonky weekend when it comes to things.
Yeah, so and I might swap it up next year. It just sort of happened this year, because everybody's expecting a thing on Sunday. It's a good chill day, but if maybe I swap it to the a different weekend next year or something, we'll see. It all just goes. But I mean, I've gotten a great response, and there's a bunch of people stoked on it. And like Sean's gonna make a trophy from Atomic. He's coming. He's gonna bring he has 3 cars, and the guys from the lowrider shop. So again, same thing with the trophies, right? Like I could give out awards, but who am I? To say who you're. I loved winning that award with Eric, right? Yeah. And that was a group of people that always judge that show, and they deal with those cars, and they do it well. It's a group of peers of that community. Well, I don't feel the need as a single individual person, or even me and Kelsey together. I don't need to tell anyone they're better. I'm just not that guy. I don't need to say, oh, you're better than someone else, right? But I think what the coolest thing is like you going and saying, oh, as the Rumble Group, we think this is a really cool car, and we'd like to give you this thing. We think you got to us, you have the coolest car here. And somebody else is going to go, oh, to us, you have the coolest car here. And then there might be that one car. Sometimes there's that one car where, like, everybody, is like, oh, that car is badass, And then that's what happened yesterday. Out of all those cars, man, for Eric, like, that's fucking cool, dude. It's like, again, like, it's just like, oh, our hard work is being like, oh, finally, here we are, and someone is respecting, is at least respecting our craft enough to, like, recognize it.
Yeah, I've got some comments about that, but we'll do that offline.
Yeah. But, man, thanks for coming on. You guys can find... go on Facebook, Instagram,
the Rumble 64 website.
Yeah, Rumble 64. I'll put a link to the Todd stuff down in the bio of the video, and thanks, man. Love you. Glad I met you. Glad we're friends. And next time we'll have you on. We can talk all about fire suppression and artificial. Todd and I had about a 4-hour conversation on the phone the other night where we started off talking about the car shows, and about 10 minutes into it, we talked about AI for the next 3.5 hours.
Yeah.
But in a way, because we're both stoked on AI, oddly enough, because we see it for like the tool that it is, and not the like they're coming to get you.
Yeah. It can be a tool.
Yeah, it is. It's cool. All right. Well, thanks, Todd.
Thanks, buddy.
Thanks.